Hey, welcome everybody to Trend Talks BizSec, episode 47. I'm one of your hosts, Jon Clay, VP of Threat Intelligence here at Trend Micro, and joining me again is Greg Young, VP of Cybersecurity. Greg, I know it's been a while for us to record this, but summer months and you and I have been traveling a lot and doing some vacationing, which is what everybody should be doing. But we're kind of back at this, and today's going to be an interesting topic. There's been a lot of movements in the cybersecurity industry over the years where companies get bought and get sold. I know a lot of there's 3,500 plus cybersecurity companies, and a lot of them start up just to be absorbed by a bigger firm eventually. But let's talk about that whole area of, as a company, do you buy or do you build or what do you do? Love to get your thoughts. Obviously, you as a 10-year veteran of Gartner, you probably had a lot of conversations with CEOs around this stuff. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in this area.
Yeah, actually, it's one of my favorite sort of topics in cybersecurity is the whole BizSec side of it, right? And this build, buy, and acquisitions. Acquisitions are really difficult to do, and from an investor perspective, it's exciting. But I always made it a habit of tracking over the years how much was absorbed, and going into all these companies, to see the results of it, who stayed around and what was the actual result on the technology. And companies only have so much capacity to absorb. Even some of the biggest companies out there, like the Cisco's, who are and the IBMs and the like, who they have machines internally that do this stuff. But there's two sides to it. There is the business side, and then there's the technology side. And my observation was that all these companies are great at doing the business side. But the technology side, it is difficult because it's hard enough to keep we spend all day keeping our products modern and fresh and putting new features in. And there's nothing more disruptive than taking alien technology in and trying to absorb it. And my personal observation was very little of that technology ever makes it in. When you have standalone businesses, it's different. So something that a company doesn't do, or something like that. But that integration is incredibly difficult and disruptive. As a customer, I always say, when you see these announcements, look to see what the impact is a year later. Has this truly been integrated and the like? And it's great to ask those questions about, when you're looking at solutions and what's your track record? How much do you build? How much do you buy? Because, nowadays it's a platform world, XDR world.
Yeah.
And this stuff has to work together. You can't, we don't want 50 plus products out there and growing. You want them integrated. You want them talking together. And just somebody else's API is not enough.
I was going to ask you about that because, like you said, it's moving to a platform world where you have tons of different integrations. McAfee back in the day with EPO did this model, right, where they'd have third parties invest and support an API. And even today, right, you've got a lot of these companies that if you want to partner with them, great, just do an API, right? So why would somebody end up going the buy route if they can just have an API to that third party product and support it in their business?
Speed to market is often one that if you find a company that's just going to save you like a year go to market or the like. On the other hand, you have to look at that. What's the integration cost going to be, or the integration time frame going to be? Can it be truly integrated? Will this be able to do? So that's a good reason to do it, especially markets that you haven't been in. So if it's if you're a firewall company and this is a identity and access management, you want to get into that market, or like some companies got into some infrastructure stuff. But there's also, does it make sense? And that's the other question. When you see these announcements, how does this make sense? Does the story make sense? Just buying a company to buy it, especially when it's not in your sort of core markets or an adjacent market. If it's two adjacencies away, I've always been skeptical, especially if it's infrastructure going into a security company. Because most people don't buy, you don't buy, infrastructure from your security company.
Right.
You're going to buy your routers and that from, XYZ security company. So.
Yeah, that's always interesting. I think, obviously the technology, the technology is a big piece, right? Is it easy to integrate or is it not easy to integrate? I think obviously as a company, you have to do your due diligence if you're looking to buy a company, if their technology will support it. Like you said, if you're 2 degrees separation, probably going to be a very difficult thing. One area that I'm curious about, right, is on the buy side. Do you buy for technology or do you buy for revenue? That's always an interesting conversation, I think, right?
Yeah, and the explanation is the test. So whenever I see the word synergy, I always kind of shiver. But if it's there's actually a few reasons. So one is, as you mentioned really correctly, was technology. So that's that time to market, or if it's really great stuff and you've got smart people, then you may buy that team. And we've seen this, for example, in the AI space,
Yeah.
that there's that's a that's a capability that's worth acquiring right now, for the people side. The tech side, naturally, you will do it for revenue, but also for geographies. If a company is really strong in a geography that you haven't been operating in, that would be another reason. But again, it's the explanation. And as a customer in the past, as in the CISO, I always look to say, does this make sense? And when a salesperson would come in and get excited about this acquisition they made, I say, well, when will I see it in my product? When will it help me as a buyer? And second is, what's your rationale for doing it? And synergy is not enough. You got to say what it's going to mean to me as a buyer. Like, yeah, your investors are going to get excited, and that's another reason to buy. Unfortunately, with our market in security, cybersecurity today is just to push the markets. Announcements do generate excitement, and excitement generates investment. So, and some companies do it on a quarterly basis. They're buying stuff just to buy it. But as a buyer of security, I want to know what it means to me, and is it going to, what do I care about it?
Yeah. And I think one of the challenges, obviously, is typically you're going to have two different cultures between the companies, right? And so, can that company that gets bought, can they be absorbed into this other company, and do they support the culture? Do they support the type of business that they're running? I think that's also one of the reasons why we probably see a lot of these things fail, just because. And then, secondly, for example, I was going to ask you about this. If I get bought and I'm the owner of the business and I was the original guy with the technology, et cetera, and next thing you know, I'm a multi-millionaire. Um, do I stay with this other company and go, or do I go and be a serial entrepreneur and I start up another one and sell it off? I mean, that's the challenge you have. And I think in even some of the engineers are probably, they get a lot of stock in those startups, and then next thing you know, they're multimillionaires as well. So how do you keep these people excited and wanting to support you when you buy them?
Yeah, it turns out that the most creative people in this sort of markets, in cybersecurity, do it because they like the cybersecurity, and it's I think that maybe the CEO culture is a little different, but for the people, for cybersecurity, sort of purists, the people who are delivering these really clever solutions, quite a few of them stay, and they stay in the business, and their teams do tend to stay. But again, it's all how good is the company at also keeping people, and that matters. So yeah, and we've seen, in fact, sort of the reverse takeovers, where really small companies have come to dominate larger companies that have acquired them, and really taken them sort of creatively forward. So your point about culture is really important. So yeah, it can, and I think for larger companies who do tend to look for this creativity, how they do that acquisition really matters, and can they embrace them, and what's their culture like as a company. And as a customer, I always knew what that company's culture was. Pretty soon, dealing with their people over time, dealing with their sales support, you quickly knew what kind of company they were, and you could guess sort of what kind of place it was to work, and would it'd be a successful acquisition. Pretty high hit rate on the guesswork on those, normally a prediction rate.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's shift a little bit to the build side, right? We talk about buy versus build. So if you go to the build route, right, which means you're going to do everything in house, you're confident that your engineers and your R&D staff can build something more effectively than going out and buying it. What are some of the benefits versus the non-benefits of doing a build model?
Is this for like a company building their own, or is this for a
Yeah.
vendor? Yeah,
Company, like I would say, let's say Trend Micro, for example, we tend to build more than we buy.
yeah.
What are the benefits of building stuff in house versus going out and buying it and trying to integrate, and all the challenges we talked just earlier about, right? getting them into your culture, making sure the technology is seamless and can get built into the native capabilities that we have, right? Versus a build model where it seems like it's probably a little more integrated.
Yeah, I think with the complexity of solutions today and with this platform type model, it's also uh, the build is generally the preferred way. And if you can do build and do it well, that's the goal. I think when you're buying into those other cases, but the preference now has shifted. I think it used to be more of a, we can have these pieces and we can have a console that can kind of integrate them in a loose fashion. But today, the tightness of the integration, the tightness of the telemetry consumption that you must have, it's generally preferred to build it. And again, you have to have that reason why you would do it. So if there's an area that you haven't invested in and it's going to get you that time quickly to market, that's a good one. Or it's a new geographic or a new kind of market, like some federal space somewhere, or some, let's say we've never worked in healthcare if we were a small company, we wanted to get into healthcare, that would be a reason to do it. But as a default, I think building is a preferred now, particularly for your longer term roadmap, because you've got the skills, you've developed it. It's not just you go buy this stuff from IKEA, you've got to put it together suddenly and hope all the pieces are there. And that doesn't happen quickly. And I think one truism is that post acquisition, the estimates are always wildly conservative about how long things are going to take. Technology is always about surprises. So, but no, and there's understanding now, and I think that never have we had the complexity that we've had in the amounts of telemetry and the amounts of technology that's there. So, understanding complexity is important. So, but there's always a time and a place for each piece. But building is
interesting. What's happening now is on the build side, a lot of it now is AI driven, right? And unless you have a significant amount of AI experts and data scientists, et cetera, inside your organization, that could be a reason why you've got to go out and buy a company that has that capability, right? And has those type of employees. That's going to become a factor, I think, moving forward, because there's just not enough people trained to code in AI at this point. So, you got to hold on to those people as much as possible. We already see in the wars between Meta and OpenAI and so forth, stealing each other's humans, right? Employees, because they just don't have enough, obviously. But that it's an interesting thing on the build side, because I do think depending on the type of company you are, like obviously we're very old, right? 35 years, and we've got a very broad portfolio. So we have the capability to support a build model, whereas a smaller startup company or a company that's been around for a while, but they only do some, like maybe let's say endpoint only, and they want to move into the bigger stack of maybe XDR, where they need some networking capability, firewall capability. They probably got to go and buy that kind of stuff, because they just don't have that capability in house to build that stuff quickly enough. And that's I think the biggest thing now is because speed to market is so short these days, right? It's compressing more and more, and you have to get out there as quickly as possible with a product or a capability that sometimes buying it is a lot faster than trying to build it. But that also means as a building type of company, you have to be very clear with your customers what your roadmaps look like, right? You've got to be able to articulate what's your roadmap, and then what's the timeline of that roadmap, right? They don't want to wait a year for something that a company's already got in the market, and they could just go and buy that very simply.
Right. No, that's a really good point you bring up. And I think what's the seed of your what you said there is that think like a buyer of the technology, not a buyer of the stock.
Right.
And there are different reasons you're going to look at that news and get excited about it. And as what features will I get as a user? What does this mean to my experience? What does this mean to my initiatives? Do I even care? Do I have if I'm not in healthcare, do I care about this healthcare acquisition you made? Or if I am, then I'm really concerned about it, and then I really want news about it. But it's more, what does it mean to me as a buyer, not what does this mean to as somebody who's picking stocks. Yeah. So I think it gets lost now in a lot of the press, is because a lot of it's driven by investment news. But what the CISOs really want to know is, what does this mean to me? Is this going to disrupt things? What does it do for the other things you told me about? And what does it mean to also is my price going to go up? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good points you bring up there. I think as so as a CISO right now, and you're looking to partner with a vendor, right? You need to think about what is their strategy, what is their traditional strategy. Are they a buy versus build, or are they a build versus buy? And then what are the benefits and negatives of each of those? But and that's where I think CISOs probably need to do a better job today of actually sitting down with their vendors and having these types of discussions. It's not just about what's your roadmap and what are you doing. It's what's your overall philosophy, what's your strategy, and how you're going to go to market, because that's going to matter in the long term, right? And that's as we are moving to this platform type approach, you're going to have these conversations with your vendors. So that would be my one takeaway, is that as we're getting to the end of the year, always a good time to start thinking about, what is our strategy for 2026? What's our plans for 2026? Well, I would say sit down with your key security vendor or vendors, if you have multiple, which you probably do, but talk to them about this type of stuff. What is your strategy? What is your roadmap? What are you looking at? How can you help me? What are my projects that I'm planning out in 2026? And how can you help me ensure that those things are done easily and safely and securely? So, I mean, your thoughts on at the end here as we wrap up, kind of what your thoughts are for a CISO?
Yeah, that was well said about, what does it mean to me? And always beware those left field sort of big acquisitions or small ones that just don't make sense. And, but you told me we were heading this path and you've suddenly bought in this path. And what does that mean? But, the inside baseball aside of buy versus build, exactly right. What does it mean to me? I always tracked as well, in the surveys I do for Magic Quadrants was what percentage of your organization is R&D and what percentage is other. And you can track that quite easily as a to see what the mix is, and be concerned if that R&D percentage is not healthy, unless you're okay with the product and that fits you, and that match. But that's a good metric to watch as well. What's that level of creativity? Are they continuing to innovate, or is this just a kind of strapping stuff on the roadmap every quarter, and just to keep the buzz alive?
Yeah, that kind of brings up the question: is, are you innovative if all you do is buy, right?
Yeah.
You're innovative in buying, but maybe not in integrating and managing that. So great discussion today, Greg. And like I said, we could probably go on and on in this, but certainly maybe in an upcoming episode, we will follow through with some more information on this topic. But any last comments?
Yep. The AI the AI message is strong. I saw yesterday there was a very large company that laid off 10,000 people, saying, because these weren't people that could be retrained in AI for some reason. But they're still hiring in AI. So it just shows that, the space we're in now also just, things move quickly. So.
Yeah, I think our next episode, maybe we talk about AI integration into your company and how you go about that, because, turning off or laying off 10,000 people, that's a tough road, but we'll see. Anyway, everybody, thanks for joining us on episode 47 of Trent Talks BizSec. Greg and I will be back in a couple of weeks to hit on another topic. But so they give us a like or give us a comment on what type of, if there's a topic out there you want us to discuss, we'd be happy to do that. So, Greg, as usual, great conversation. Love these. Let's looking forward to the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Sure. Thanks all.